Hello. This is the first lecture that I'll be giving on Chapter 23 of Miguel Roig Francolí's textbook, Harmony in Context. Chapter 23 takes up the subject of modal mixture or modal borrowing, and so that's what I'll be talking about with you today. To start with, I'd like to play you a musical example. What I'm going to play for you is the national anthem of France, and I'd like you to listen for the way that it starts in major and then goes to minor and then comes back to major. Now, it doesn't change key. The tonic note is still the same, but it goes from whatever major key it starts in to the parallel minor and then back to the parallel major. It's a very strange national anthem. It's very bloody. There's a part where it says, they are coming into our fields. They're going to slit the throats of our children and wives. And it's right at that point that it goes into the minor mode. I guess, quite understandably, if you're talking about having your family murdered by the invading hordes. But that's the part that I'd really like you to listen for, that shift from major to minor, back to major without ever changing keys. Okay, I told you that the words were a little bit bloody, but there you go. Okay, so that's an example of modal mixture. Modal mixture, which can also be called modal exchange or modal borrowing, has to do with mixing up or interweaving music that's in a major key and music that's in the parallel minor key. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. I'm going to be going through a handout, which is actually up on Canvas for you right now. It's called Handout on Modal Mixture. So you should go to the Chapter 23 module and download the handout. It might actually be helpful for you to have the handout in front of you when you're listening to this video, but in any case, it's available on Canvas. So modal mixture or modal borrowing can refer to a situation where a single chord from the opposite mode is incorporated into a passage of music. It could refer to a situation where a whole phrase in the opposite mode is incorporated. That's kind of what happened in La Marseillaise. Or it could be an entire section of music. Now again, we're not talking about modulation because we're not talking about a change of key. We're talking about a change of mode, a change from major to minor, or vice versa. Now, in the broadest definition, modal mixture would encompass using any chord in minor that had a raised scale degree 7, scale degree 6, or scale degree 3. And it would include any chords in major that used the lower scale degree 7, scale degree 6, and scale degree 3. But the situation of minor is a little bit trickier because remember, we like to talk in minor about having a melodic form of the minor scale and a harmonic form of the minor scale. And those two forms of the minor scale both include a raised scale degree 7, and the melodic form of minor also includes a raised scale degree 6. Typically, we wouldn't think of those chords that can be explained in minor by using alternate forms of the minor scale. Typically, we wouldn't think of those chords as really constituting modal mixture. On the other hand, the major 1 chord that comes at the end of a minor piece, that chord that we refer to as the Picardy third, that is a true example of modal mixture. However, most of the examples of modal mixture that we're going to consider in chapter 23 happen when a piece of music is in a major key and we borrow individual chords, or we take several chords from the parallel minor mode. So your book tells you that modal mixture is much more common happening in a major key where we take individual minor chords than it is in a minor key. And that's because most of the time in a minor key, those apparent mode mixture examples would really simply be a case of using an alternate form of the minor scale. Now, modal borrowing does not change the function of chords. If you're in a major key, the 4 chord has certain functions. It can be a tonic prolongation chord. More often it's a predominant chord. And those are the same functions that 4 has in a minor key. So when we borrow a minor 4 and we stick it in a major context, we're not changing the function of that chord. It still is either a tonic prolongation or a predominant chord. In fact, we're really not doing anything new because you've already done a whole bunch of analysis and also a whole bunch of part writing in minor keys using the minor 4. So chapter 23 isn't really telling you anything that's new. It's simply asking you to consider the idea that we can mix up major and minor modes within the same phrase and certainly within the same piece. Okay, I'd like to start with a short example of single chord modal mixture. This is from a song by Robert Schumann called Ich grole nicht, I don't complain. Here's at the bottom of the page, you can see that there's a translation for this song. The German is Ich grole nicht und wenn das Herz auch bricht. And a sort of word-for-word translation is below. I don't complain, and even if my heart also breaks, ... A more free translation would be something like, I won't complain, although my heart breaks with pain. Now, we're in the key of C major, and what I'd like you to listen for is the effect of the chord that we have at the beginning of the third measure. Notice the A flats here. A flat is not a note that's in the key of C major, but it is a note that we have in the key of C minor. So what we're doing here is we're borrowing a chord that belongs in C minor, and we're putting it in a major context. And that's what modal mixture is. Okay, and I'd like you to notice how carefully Schumann has placed that use of modal mixture. The A flat in the vocal line and the modal mixture chord is right there on the word Herz, which means heart. So even though the narrator is saying, I won't complain, the use of modal mixture, that sudden inflection towards the minor, shows us just how heartbroken he, presumably, actually is. So it's a very affecting use of a little bit of the minor mode put into a whole context of major mode. The next piece that I'd like to share with you that uses modal mixture is a song that's called Lift Every Voice and Sing. This song, it has often been called the Black National Anthem. It's a song that's very important to African Americans in this country. It talks about the enslavement experience and the struggle for justice and civil rights. Let me share my screen again and give you some information about the fellow who wrote the poetry and his brother, the composer who set the poem to music. Lift Every Voice and Sing was composed in the early 20th century. The poem is by James Weldon Johnson, and the music is by Rosamond Johnson. These two were brothers. They were born in Jacksonville, Florida. Their mother was from the Bahamas, and their father was an African American. They come from a long line of politically active folks who were engaged in civil rights. Their maternal grandfather, Stephen Dillett, was the first man of color to be elected to the legislature in the Bahamas. The poet, James, was educated at Atlanta University, which is a historically black college. And Rosamond got his musical training at the New England Conservatory and also in London. Both of them moved to New York City, and both of them were part of the artistic and cultural flowering that we now refer to as the Harlem Renaissance. that big explosion of African American arts, writing, music, painting, etc., that happened in the early part of the 20th century in Harlem. Both brothers were active members of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, and Lift Every Voice and Sing was composed for and had its first performance as part of the celebration of Abraham Lincoln's birthday in 1905. You're going to have a homework assignment where you have to do some analysis of this song because it also has very interesting secondary dominant chords, and it's worth looking at. But for right now, we're just going to listen to it, not looking at the music, but listening for the sound of modal mixture. Take a look at this first verse here that starts Lift Every Voice and Sing. This is in a major key. It's in the key of A flat major. When we get down here to the second part of the verse, the lyrics go, sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. And I'd like you to listen during this part of the lyrics that are in bold type, because this is where we get modal mixture. We're in the key of A flat major, but suddenly we're going to be borrowing F flats, which are part of A flat minor, not part of A flat major. So suddenly we go into the parallel minor just for this little piece of the song, and then we go back into the major. So we're going to listen to Lift Every Voice and Sing, just the first verse, and listen for that modal mixture. Okay, so that's the introduction to modal mixture. I hope that you know what modal mixture is. I hope that you understand the difference between modal mixture or modal borrowing on the one hand versus modulation on the other hand. And I hope that you have a little bit of a sense of the sound and the musical effect of modal borrowing from the major into the minor, or maybe I should say the other way, borrowing minor chords into the major mode. Next time we'll look at some specific chords and we'll look at some part writing issues.